Imagine you are not you. You are someone born 2,000 years from now. You have never heard the word skyscraper. You have no concept of electricity, no memory of the internet, no idea what a shopping mall was built for. You are standing in what was once called Chicago, and you are terrified. Not because the city is destroyed, you expected ruins. Your entire career was built on ruins. You have excavated collapsed empires, carbon-baited the bones of kings, cataloged the wreckage of a dozen dead civilizations. But this is different, because nothing here makes sense. The towers are too tall to be walls, too hollow to be temples, too numerous to be monuments. There are hundreds of them, crammed onto a strip of land between a lake and a plain, every single one of them pointing at the sky like an accusation. You open your field journal. You write, monolithic vertical structures, height 300 to 500 meters, material, fused sand and drawn metal, purpose, unknown. The builders appear to have worshipped altitude. And here is the part that should keep you up at night. You are not wrong. We did worship altitude. We just called it real estate. That joke will not land in the year 4000. Nothing about us will. The physical record we are leaving behind, the permanent chemical, geological record of this civilization, is one of the strangest collections of artifacts any future species will ever try to decode. We built in materials designed to be replaced. We stored everything important on devices that dissolve in a century. And we left enough plastic to define an entire geological era, then threw most of it into the ocean. We are going to be a nightmare to excavate. Here is exactly what they will find.
The Anatomy of Decay. Part 1. The Preservation Bias. Before we get to the sites, you need to understand one thing, one idea that changes everything about how you look at history. Preservation is not about importance. It is about chemistry. The things that survive are not the things that mattered. They are the things that happen to be made of materials that resist oxygen, water, bacteria, and time. That is the entire logic of the archaeological record, nothing more complicated than that. A clay pot from 3000 BC survived not because the person who made it was significant. It survived because fired clay is chemically stable, and nobody melted it down. Think about what that means. Everything we know about ancient civilizations, every story, every assumption, every confident claim in every history textbook is filtered through the bias of what happened to last. We know Roman military campaigns in extraordinary detail. Roman soldiers used lead pipes, iron weapons, fired clay drainage. All of it preserves beautifully. We know almost nothing about the daily lives of the women who ran Roman households because the tools they used were wood, cloth, leather, all of it rotted within decades. The historical record does not reflect what was important, it reflects what was durable. Rhetorical reset. Now apply that to us. Ask yourself right now, what are we actually making that will last? Our buildings? Standard modern concrete degrades within 50 to 100 years without maintenance. The Roman Pantheon has stood for nearly 2,000 years. It was made with volcanic ash concrete, a formula we lost and only recently reverse-engineered. Our concrete is faster, cheaper, and dramatically less permanent. Most structures you see right now are designed to be replaced within your lifetime. Some are already scheduled for demolition. Our roads? Asphalt is organic. It cracks in cold, softens in heat, breaks down under UV. Without maintenance, a modern highway becomes impassable within 15 to 20 years. Within a century, a faint stain in the soil. Our digital records? Stop. This is where it gets serious. We have stored more information in the last 20 years than in all of prior human history combined, and almost none of it will survive more than a few decades without active, continuous, expensive preservation. Hard drives fail, servers require power, file formats become unreadable. The cloud is not a cloud. It is a warehouse of physical machines that require electricity, cooling, maintenance, and corporate solvency to stay alive. The moment any one of those conditions fails, the data is gone. Archivists have a name for what we are living through right now: the digital dark age. A period future historians may find nearly impossible to reconstruct, not because we didn't record things, but because we recorded everything in formats engineered to be temporary. There is a clay tablet, roughly 4,000 years old, on which a customer complained to a copper merchant about bad metal, one of the earliest written complaints in human history. It survived because it was clay. It needed no power, no software, no server farm. It just sat there for 4,000 years. Your emails will not do that.
Part 2. The sites. Let's get specific. There are places on this planet right now that future archaeologists will spend generations trying to understand. Places that will look, from 2,000 years away, like the deliberate monuments of a civilization with baffling priorities and possibly self-destructive instincts. 3 sites, each one stranger than the last. Site 1. The shopping mall. In the mid-20th century, the United States began constructing enormous enclosed retail structures. At their peak, over 1,500 of them existed. Some covered more than 1 million square feet. Climate-controlled to exactly 70 degrees year-round. Lit entirely by artificial light. No windows facing outward. That was deliberate. The architecture was specifically engineered to eliminate any sense of time passing, any awareness of weather, any impulse to leave. You were meant to forget the outside world existed. It worked. For decades it worked. Then online shopping arrived. The anchor stores closed. The smaller stores lost their customers. The revenue dried up. Maintenance stopped. And now hundreds of them are dying. Walk through one today and you see something that looks almost prehistoric. Skylights growing plants, saplings pushing through cracked tile, raccoons nesting in the food court, and the mannequins standing in the empty display windows of shuttered stores, dressed in fashions 15 years out of date, posed in gestures of casual consumption, staring at corridors where nobody walks. Rhetorical reset. Now encounter that in the year 3000. You would call it a temple. The scale demands it. The deliberate exclusion of the outside world, sacred architecture, the internal lighting, ritual atmosphere, the central fountain, ceremonial focal point, the movement patterns of the corridors designed to guide visitors in specific loops, processional routes, and the mannequins. A humanoid figure, hard polymer, naturalistic pose, preserved synthetic clothing, found inside a massive enclosed structure with no obvious practical purpose. That figure is going to be classified as a deity. There is no other conclusion available to someone without context. Future textbooks will describe the deity with the arm pointing at the shoe rack. Scholars will debate what the shoe rack represented. And before you laugh, we do this constantly. We look at Egyptian temple figures and call them religious idols with total confidence. We interpret Stonehenge as a ritual site. We label anything we cannot explain a temple, a burial ground, or a cult object. We are not necessarily wrong, but we are almost certainly missing most of the story. Future archaeologists will miss most of ours. Site 2. The Data Center.
Somewhere outside Reno, Nevada, there is a building with no windows, no signage, no public address, no listing on any public map. It is the size of several city blocks. It consumes as much electricity as a small city. It requires constant cooling. The equipment inside generates so much heat that without active climate control, it would begin to destroy itself within hours. Inside, on rack after rack of spinning magnetic disks and solid-state arrays, is a significant portion of the world's digital information: medical records, financial transactions, classified communications, surveillance footage, the complete creative output of millions of human beings, decades of personal photographs, every text message, every search query, every private moment someone chose to record. The organizations that run these buildings understand at a deep level how fragile they are. That is why the protocols are so elaborate. That is why the backup systems have backups. That is why the power redundancy is engineered to the level of paranoia, because they know what happens when it stops.
Future archaeologists will find the physical shell, the concrete walls, the raised floor systems, the cooling infrastructure remnants, the cable runs. They will find the geometry of a structure clearly built to house something of extraordinary importance. They will not know what it housed, because the storage media, the actual disks, the actual chips, will have oxidized, delaminated, dissolved into chemically inert fragments. They will know we cared enormously about something that required industrial-scale infrastructure to preserve. They will not know that the something was, in significant part, arguments about sports teams and photographs of food. Site 3. The Nuclear Waste Repository. This one is not funny. The United States, Russia, France, the United Kingdom, and several other nations have accumulated tens of thousands of metric tons of high-level radioactive waste, spent fuel from nuclear reactors, byproducts of weapons programs, material that will remain lethally radioactive for periods ranging from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of years. We have nowhere to put it. The proposed solution is deep geological repositories, tunnels carved into stable rock, designed to entomb the waste for the long term. The Waste Isolation Pilot Plant in New Mexico is the only operational site of its kind in the world. But here is the problem that keeps engineers, linguists, anthropologists, and semioticians up at night. How do you warn someone 10,000 years from now not to dig here? 10,000 years ago, humans had not yet developed writing. The oldest continuously spoken languages are 4,000 to 5,000 years old. No language we speak today is guaranteed to survive another 500 years, let alone 10,000. No symbol system we can design is certain to communicate danger across 300 generations of cultural change. The U.S. Department of Energy commissioned serious studies on this, real researchers, real money. The proposals that came back ranged from pragmatic to surreal. 1. A landscape of enormous concrete spikes, jagged, hostile, designed to communicate danger through pure physical form without language. Another, breeding a species of cat engineered to change color near radioactive material, then constructing a religion around maintaining those cats, so that the warning would be culturally transmitted across millennia, encoded in mythology rather than text. That is not fiction. That is a real proposal from a real government report. We are right now attempting to communicate with the deep future, and we are not confident it will work. Future archaeologists will find these sites, and depending on how well our warning systems held, they will either stop at the boundary or walk directly into it. We built the problem, we buried it,
and we left a note we are not sure anyone will be able to read. Act 2. The Anatomy of Decay. Part 3. The Science Tightened. Now let's talk about what physically happens. How does a civilization decay? What survives? What vanishes? And what does our specific civilization leave behind that no previous one ever has? Concrete. Modern reinforced concrete degrades through several mechanisms, and you need to know them because they determine what future archaeologists actually find. Carbonation first. Atmospheric CO2 reacts with calcium hydroxide in the concrete. The concrete becomes less alkaline. The steel reinforcement inside begins to corrode. Then expansion. Rusting steel grows. The concrete cracks from the inside out. Then water infiltration. Each winter, water enters those cracks, freezes, expands, widens them. Within 50 to 100 years of abandonment, most modern reinforced concrete structures begin serious degradation. Within 200 years, facades fail. Within 500, the steel skeleton itself has rusted to the point of structural collapse. A modern skyscraper, unmaintained, eventually becomes a mound of iron oxide and concrete rubble with a high density of synthetic material scattered through the debris layer. Compare that to the Pantheon, still standing after 2,000 years, because volcanic ash concrete forms a different mineral structure that actually strengthens over time. We know this. We have known it for decades. We still build with the cheaper material. Steel. Steel rusts, obvious, but the rate matters. Exposed structural steel in a temperate, humid climate loses significant mass within decades. Without protective coating, paint, galvanization, a steel I-beam begins visible surface corrosion within a few years, significant structural compromise within 50 to 100. What this means is that the visual signature of our civilization, the gleaming towers, the suspension bridges, the industrial infrastructure, disappears faster than almost any previous monumental construction in history. The pyramids are limestone. They will outlast our cities by tens of thousands of years. The plastic layer. This is the one that defines us. A plastic bottle discarded today remains physically intact for approximately 450 years. Plastic bags, up to 1,000 years. Fishing line, 600 years. The microplastics, fragments small enough to enter the bloodstream, to cross into the placenta, those will persist in geological strata for millions of years. Geologists already have a name for the rock layer that will mark our era. The Anthropocene. One of its clearest markers will be a thin, globally consistent band of synthetic polymer embedded in sediment. Every ocean floor, every lake bed, every river delta on the planet. We will be visible in the fossil record, not through our art, not through our science, not through our cities, those will be rubble, through our garbage. The most permanent thing our civilization is producing is the thing we considered most disposable. Let that sit for a moment. Every civilization before us left monuments. The Egyptians left pyramids. The Romans left roads. The Greeks left temples. We are leaving a plastic horizon embedded in the bedrock of the planet. That is our monument. That is what marks our era in deep time. Now let's talk about what that means. Act 3. The Warning. Let's return to our future archaeologist. Call her Dr. Sarah. She is standing in what was once Los Angeles. The year is 3800. The city has been uninhabited for roughly 1400 years. Her field's consensus, the abandonment resulted from a combination of prolonged drought, infrastructure failure, and the collapse of supply chains that made dense urban habitation untenable sometime in the mid-21st century. She is excavating a residential neighborhood. She has found 3 objects she cannot explain. The first, a small rectangular object, aluminum, glass, unknown polymer. The glass face is cracked, inside a circuit board. She recognizes it as computational hardware, but this one is extraordinarily miniaturized, and it contains no interface she can operate. Whatever it communicated in a format that died with the infrastructure supporting it. She labels it personal computation device, possible communication function, storage medium indeterminate. She is correct on all counts. She will never know it contained 4,700 photographs, 11 years of text messages, and the complete recorded memory of a specific human life. A person's children growing up, their parents growing old, their own face, captured in hundreds of moments they considered worth keeping. The device is there, the life is gone. The second, a small laminated card, a photograph of a human face, a string of numbers, the name of an institution, a bank, that no longer exists. Made of polyvinyl chloride, one of the more durable plastics, it will outlast almost everything else in this excavation. She labels it identity document or ritual object, institutional affiliation unclear. She is not wrong. The third stops her. A child's toy, a small plastic figure, humanoid, stylized bodysuit, cape, bright red and blue, pigmentation mostly intact, one arm extended forward. She knows enough not to reflexively call it a deity. Her field learned that lesson painfully. But she cannot determine its function. Too small to be architectural, too stylized to be representational, found in a domestic context near objects clearly associated with a child. She writes, figurative object, domestic context, juvenile association, possible educational function used to teach moral or social values through narrative. The pose suggests agency, forward motion, action. The institution it represents, if any, is unclear. She is remarkably close. She just cannot name him. Dr. Sarah will spend her career in these ruins, and here is what she will eventually conclude. We were a species of extraordinary technical capability and peculiar priorities. We built machines capable of billions of calculations per second, and used them primarily to look at images of food and argue with strangers. We developed medicine that could extend human life by decades and made it available only to those who could afford it, while millions died from diseases we already knew how to treat. We understood with precise scientific clarity that our energy systems were destabilizing the climate and continued using them anyway, not from ignorance, not from stupidity, from a failure of collective coordination that our political systems were not designed to solve. She will be very clear in her work. We were not stupid. The engineering alone proves that. The suspension bridges, the tunnels, the satellites, the spacecraft launched into deep space carrying messages for anyone listening, because we were the kind of species that did that hoped for that. But we were disconnected, between knowing and doing, between understanding and acting, between the long term and the immediate. That gap, she will find it everywhere she digs. It will be the defining characteristic of our era in her field's literature. The species that knew and continued anyway. But she will also find something she did not expect: beauty. In the ruins of what were once called museums, she will find evidence of an extraordinary artistic impulse. Paintings, sculptures, architectural details of breathtaking refinement, musical instruments she can partially reconstruct. She will find books, some of them, stored in controlled conditions or printed on acid-free paper, will have partially survived. Her linguists will take years to decode the language, but they will eventually read fragments. She will find poetry written by people who were afraid, philosophy written by people who were uncertain, fiction written by people who needed desperately to imagine something better than the world they lived in. She will find evidence that we knew something was wrong, that we felt it, that we tried, in the ways available to us, to say so. And that, more than the plastic strata, more than the silent data centers, more than the temples we called malls, that will be the thing that moves her. We were not indifferent. We cared, and we left the evidence of caring everywhere she looks. Her final book, the defining work of her career, will make a single central argument. The civilization of the early Anthropocene did not fail from cruelty or carelessness. It struggled because the systems it built, economic, political, social, were not designed to act on the timescale that its problems required. It could see centuries ahead and act only months at a time. It was a civilization perpetually at war with its own foresight. She will call it the great tragedy of a species that could imagine everything and change nothing fast enough. So here you are, not in the year 3800, not standing in the rubble of Los Angeles with a field journal and a headlamp and 1400 years of distance between you and all of this. Here, now, in whatever room, whatever commute, whatever quiet moment brought you to this video. Look around you. What are you surrounded by? Plastic, aluminum, glass, synthetic fabric. Devices designed to be replaced, not preserved. A life built from materials that will outlast your memory of them by centuries. You are already an archaeological site. You are leaving a record right now, not in clay tablets or carved stone, but in polymer compounds and server logs and the slow chemical signature of everything you have consumed and discarded. The ruins are not something that happens to civilizations after they end. The ruins are being built today, right now, with full knowledge, with eyes open. The ancient Romans did not know their empire would fall. They were not standing in the Forum thinking, someday tourists from a civilization we cannot imagine will pay to photograph this. We are different. We have the evidence of every collapsed civilization before us. We have the archaeological record, the climate models, the infrastructure assessments, the peer-reviewed projections. We know, with a precision no previous civilization possessed, exactly how fragile the systems we depend on actually are. We are the first civilization in history that can see its own ruins forming. The question, the only question that matters, is whether knowing that changes anything. I cannot answer that for you, but I can tell you this. The secrets of our past are the only map we have for the future. Every civilization that came before us left clues in the rubble about what worked, what collapsed, what endured through everything else. Every ruin is a lesson, and the only way to read those lessons, to actually use them, is to keep looking, keep asking, keep refusing to look away from what the evidence shows us, even when it is uncomfortable. That is what this channel is for. Subscribe to Chronipedia. Keep digging.